Hey chaps, I hope you're all well. Today we're going to be crushing another milestone and getting our maps saved and loaded in the editor, which subsequently means we can get them loaded up into the game when we've been working on them in the editor as well. After all, what use is a map if we can't freaking use it? So let's just get straight to it and get loading and saving our maps. So to get this show on the road, we're going to do some work in our editor project. So over on the right in the Solution Explorer, we're going to expand the editor project. Right click on Form 1 CS and View Designer. In here what we're going to do is create a couple of buttons to represent our save and load functionality, and we're going to create that in the menu strip underneath the File button. So click on File now, where it says type here I'm going to click and I'm going to type save. Additionally I'm going to click there again where it says type here and I'm going to type load. And finally, what we're going to do is create a separator to separate the new button from the save and load buttons. And to do that, I'm going to click where it says type here on the right. There is a drop down arrow. I'm going to click there and then I'm going to click separator, which will spawn a separator underneath the load button. What I can do now is select that separator and drag it up above the save button. So now we have a separation of the new and then the save and load buttons. The last thing we need to do is add a couple of handlers to handle the click events of the save and load buttons. So all we need to do here is double click on the save button. That will create a save toolstrip menu item click event handler in the Form 1 CS class. And we just need to repeat that for the load button. So if we go to Form 1 CS Designer again, double click on load, and like the save button, it will create an event handler for the load button as well. And we're crushing it. So the next task at hand is to add some functionality to our save and load button handlers, and we're going to be starting with the save button handler. In our save button handler, we're going to be adding and using a save file dialog, which will basically allow us to specify a location at which we want to save our map file to. The save file dialog works almost exactly the same way as the open file dialog that we had used when we first introduced the concept of tile sets a few episodes back. So over in my save button handler here, I'm going to create a save file dialog. I'm going to call it dialog. I'll create a new instance of that. And I want to set an initial property on that dialog, so I'm going to enter my curly brackets here, followed by a semicolon. So the property I want to set on the dialog is going to be the filter. Now I did discuss how the filter works when we use the open file dialog, but just for context and a recap, the filter is basically, in the context of the save file dialog, going to reduce the number of options we have available to us for the file type extension we're going to be saving as. And in my case, I want to set a custom file extension for our maps, i.e. .map. So how the filter works is in a string, there's going to be a vertical bar, and again, just a recap, on the left is going to be the friendly name for this file type extension. So in my case, I'm going to just call this the game map, and then in brackets, *.map. Again, this doesn't matter, this can be anything you want, this is just the readable name. And on the part of the right here, on the right hand side of the bar, is the important part, in which case it's going to be *.map. That is the only part that matters in this entire string, and that and the bar, of course. The left can be whatever you want it to be. Okay, and the last thing we need to do is just show this dialog. Now there are plenty of examples through this file about how we show and work with dialogs, such as here, and that's the pattern we're going to be following here as well. So I'm going to copy this code, and this is in the button edit tile set click event here, and there's another one further up here for the new map button handler. So back in the save button handler, I'm going to paste the code that I've just copied from my edit tile set button handler. There we go. Okay, and then in here, all I'm going to do is just to do handle saving map. So if we give that a quick run now by hitting the start button, and then click on file and save, you can see the save file dialog in action. On the bottom where it says save as type, this is the filter we provided to that dialog. The value you are reading there is the value on the left hand side of that vertical bar. The value on the right hand side is what is enforcing that filter. But you don't see that in this dialog anywhere, apart from the fact that those file types are filtered out in the view here. Okay, so that's our dialog up and running. We now just need to add some functionality to begin saving the map. And we're going to be starting that work over in the engine project in the map class. So if we expand the engine project, expand Tilemaps and open up the map class, in here we're just going to scroll to the bottom of the class and we're going to add a new method for our save. So public void save. And this method is going to accept a stream. Call it stream. We need to add the namespace here, so control period using system.io. And here is our boilerplate empty method for saving. Now, up until this stage, all we've used is JSON for reading and writing data to the disk. Using a stream, this opens up various doors and avenues for us on how we work with our data. You may have seen, using a texture 2D, that you can load your texture from a stream, and likewise you can also save it to a stream as a PNG or other format. Now, the real bonus of just allowing the consumer to pass along any old stream is that this stream can be of absolutely any type, including but not limited to a file stream, network stream, or memory stream, and your code for writing your map should not care. In our case, we're going to be using the binary writer to write the data to the stream. The binary writer writes the underlying bytes of the data to the stream, which is a very compact way of storing the data. It also provides a level of obfuscation as well, as it relies on some knowledge of how the data is constructed to understand it when reading it back. So with that said, we need to understand what would be required if we were to construct our map from a file. So the main thing we need to know when creating a map from file is we need to know what the tile width, tile height is, and what the width and the height is. Of course, we need to know about the layers as well, as that's where our tile data is stored. So scrolling back down to our save method here, we're going to create, first of all, a binary writer. So using binary writer, writer equals new binary writer, and pass in the stream. Okay, so what we're going to do is write some of the essentials that we need to this stream. So writer.write, and then we're going to pass in a few of the essentials we just spoke about. So we're going to pass the width, the height, tile width, and then the tile height. Okay, and then we need to know about the layers themselves. But first of all, we need to know about how many layers there are, so we know how many to read back. So writer.write layers.count. And then for each layer, so for I equals 0, I under layers.count, I++, and then here to do write the layer. Now we could do that from here, but it makes more sense to pass that responsibility onto the layer class itself. So what we're going to do is create a similar save method in the layer class so that it can write its information about the tiles. So now if we head over to the TileLayer class, open that up here on the right, scroll to the bottom of the TileLayer class, and we're going to add a new method for saving the layer. Now in this particular case, what we're going to do is add an internal method because we want our main entry point to be the map, and we don't really want people to be saving layers themselves directly. So in the layer class, I'm going to create an internal void save, and this is going to accept the binary writer directly. Okay, we need to add the namespace, control period, using system.io, and there we go. Okay, so now we need to, very much the same way as we did with the map class, work out what our essential information is that we need to write about this layer. Okay, so it has a tile width, a tile height, and then of course it has all the tiles as well. And then additionally it also has a name. So let's get to writing that information to this stream. So in our save method here, what we're going to do is we're going to write out writer.write. We'll first go for the tile width, write tile height, and then we need to pull out the information about the tile array as well. But first of all, we're going to go writer, write, and then write the name. Okay, so to get the information about the tiles, like we did working out the number of layers, we need to work out what the number of tiles are as well. So I'm going to go for writer.write tiles get length 0, writer.write tiles get length 1. Okay, so we're getting how many there are on the x-axis and how many there are on the y-axis. And that's exactly the same thing we do up here in the draw code as well. Okay, the last thing we need to do is we need to write all the tile information to this stream for each individual tile. So we're going to copy the for loop from the draw method in the layer, so we have that template already. So I'm going to copy both of these loops, and we're going to stick these underneath the last write statement that we have. And then I'm going to strip out the contents of those loops. Okay, so with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to type writer.write. We're going to pull out each individual tile, so tiles xy dot tile set index right tiles xy tile index. Okay, and much like we did with the tile layer, we could give the tile its own save method, but it feels a little bit overkill. It doesn't really have any logic in it, so we're just going to roll with that for now, and that should be okay. So that's our save method for the layers. If we go back to the map class now, we just need to call that save method from this loop we've created. So let's remove that to do, then type layers I.save and pass in our writer. So in essence, we should have all the ingredients we need to now be saving our map to a file or to a stream. The last thing we need to do is create a file stream and pass this along to our map save method so we know it's saving to a stream that represents a file that you've just selected. So now if we head over to our MonoGame editor class over in the editor, right click and view code, in here is where we hold and represent the currently active map. In here is also where we create new maps, so it makes sense to have the method in here for saving it as well. So underneath the create method, or create map method, I want to create a new public void save map, and this again is going to accept a stream. Okay, I need to add the namespace, control period, using system IO, and then in here I'm just going to call mymap.save and pass that stream. And lastly, if we go back to the form1cs class where we have the click handler for the save button, all we're going to do here is call MonoGame editor1 save map, and then of course it expects a stream to be passed to it, and currently we don't have one. We do want to save this to a file, so now we're going to create a file stream and pass that along to this method. So here I'm just going to call using file stream equals file, let's add the namespace, control period, using system IO, dot open write, and then what we're going to do is pass the path of the file you've selected, which we can pull out of the dialog. So dialog dot file name, there we go, file name, and then here just put the curly brackets in, and then pass this along to the save map method. So we'll put that inside the using statement, and then we'll just pass the file stream to it. Oh, with the correct spelling. Okay, so there what we've done is we've set up a file stream. So this is a stream open to the file that you've just selected in the save file dialog, and then we're passing that stream along to the save map method, where it goes around its business of saving it using a binary writer. So now if we just give this a quick test out to see how it works, hit the start button for the editor. I'm just going to plaster around a few tiles on this little map here, just so we've got some populated tiles on there. Hit the save button, type in a name for my test map, so I'm going to call this my map, save. And then if we go to the folder it's saved to here, you'll see we have mymap.map. And it's quite small, it's only 2 kilobytes, but that's what you'd expect from a map really small like this anyway. And if I open that file up in Visual Studio, I'll open it up in Notepad, you'll see here it's just a bunch of gobbledygook, where it has, you'll see some things and make out some things like the base layer name there, and there's probably another one for the other layer somewhere, there you go, second layer, but the rest of it just doesn't really make sense because it's all written in binary. Okay, so we've proven out we can write the file to disk. The next thing and the next challenge we have to tackle is to make sure we can load it back up again and it all looks the same way, which is going to be the fun part. So now we move on to the load button click handler, which is just below the save one. So first of all, we're going to create an open file dialog. Again, let's call it dialog equals new open file dialog, and let's set some properties on this guy as well. Semicolon at the end there. We're going to copy the filter from the save file dialog. So if we copy that, paste that in here, and then we're going to add a couple of additional properties as well. So first of all, we don't want to allow multi-select, and we want to make sure that the file that's been selected does exist. And let's take the pattern from the save button handler as well for checking if the dialog OK button was pressed. So just copy that, paste that in here, and remove most of this code. Okay, so now we just want to trigger the loading of the map. And so to start that process, we need to add some new methods to the map class to facilitate loading one. So heading over to the map class, what we're going to do underneath the public void save, we're going to add a private void load, which accepts a stream. Now do note I've made this private as I don't want people to call this inadvertently. It just needs to be called as part of a special constructor that we're going to add. Okay, so conversely to the writer, we need to create a binary reader. So we've created using binary reader, reader equals new, binary reader, and pass in the stream. And we need to read in that information in the same order that we wrote it in, okay? But because we're in the same context here as the map we want to load it into, we're going to assign them directly. So our width becomes reader, read it 32. I do want to clarify here retrospectively why I'm using read int 32, and that is because we are using an int for the likes of width. And where we use an int, we read them in as an int 32 as they are 32 bits in length. They are equivalent int 16 and int 64 as well for shorts and longs. Height becomes reader, read it 32. The next two, as you can see here, are the tile width and tile height. So we read them in next. So tile width equals reader, read it 32. Tile height equals reader, read it 32. And then we need the number of layers. So our int layer count is equal to reader, read it 32. And then we perform a loop and then read in the layers. So for in I equals 0, I under layer count, I plus plus, and then here to do read in layers. Okay, so next we're just going to add our constructor for calling this load method. So scrolling to the top here, we're going to add a new constructor underneath the existing one, public map, which accepts a stream. All this constructor is going to do is call through to that load method. So load, pass in the stream. And maybe instantiate the list of layers like we did here. So we'll do that as well just before we call load. And then whilst we're in the load method, we don't need to worry about creating the list, we just a case of adding to it. Okay, so now we've got our load method here, but of course we aren't reading in the layers yet, and that's our next job to tackle. So in the same vein, we're going to head over to the TileLayer class, if I open him. And what we're going to do is add a internal, or actually a private, void load, and this is going to accept the binary reader. Okay, and like before, we're going to create a constructor specific for this scenario. This is going to be an internal constructor, tile layer, and this expects to be passed a stream. So yeah, this is supposed to be a binary reader, and I promise you, I do realize this in a moment. Just bear with me, I promise you. Thank you, love you very much. And this will call through to that load method. Okay, so now if we scroll down to our load method, we can start reading in the data. So like before, we need to read it in the exact same format in which we wrote it to. So we need to read in first the tile width, reader, read it 32. Tile height equals reader, read it 32. And then the name becomes reader, read string. Now the beauty of this is that how strings are written and how it knows the length of the string is that when you perform a write and it's given a string, it writes the number of characters and then the value of that string. So it's pretty nifty, it's quite smart, it knows what it's doing in this format. Okay, so next thing we need to do is read in the number of tiles that we have. So I'll go for int width equals reader, read it 32, height equals reader, read it 32, and then we'll construct our tile array from that. So tiles equals new tile, width, height, and then like the same way we wrote it, we need to then read it back. So I'm going to copy these double loops here, paste that underneath here, and then read them in for the new tiles. So tiles xy equals new tile, and I'm going to pass it those properties that we wrote. So tile set index is equal to reader, read int 32, tile index equals reader, read int 32, and there are our tiles. Okay, so now we have our load method for our tile layers. We have our constructor for our tile layers, which accepts a stream. Oh, what's going on here? Binary reader. Oh, okay, my bad. Let's call this binary reader. Reader. And pass that through. I apologize. And then from our map class, all we need to do is call that new constructor for each layer that we have. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is call layers. Layers, capital L, dot add, new tile layer, and pass in that reader. Okay, so in essence, we have most of our code now for loading a tile map, but we of course aren't calling it from our dialog yet, and that's the next thing we need to do. So like before, if we head over to our MonoGame editor class, right underneath where we created our save map method, we're now going to have a load map method. So public void load map stream. And then my map equals new map, and we pass in that stream. Okay, so now if we go back to the form1 class, like before, we need to create a file stream for reading that map in. So let's copy this block of code from our save map method, paste it in here, and change it around a little bit. So instead of open write, we're going to read this, or call this open read, and then instead of save map, we're going to call load map. So for the most part, that is pretty much it. The last thing we need to do is just try out and make sure it works. So let's just go ahead and launch it and see what happens. So we're going to hit the start button. And the first thing I'm going to do is hit load and select the map that we saved earlier on. So here's my map.map, and I'm going to hit open. And there it is, pretty much as I left it. What I need to do and need to make sure is working is that the layers are working correctly. Okay, so what I'm going to do is hit new. I'm going to select a map width of, say, 21, and a tile width and tile height of 32, just to give it a little bit bigger. But wait, what's happened down here? You'll see that we've gained multiple layers. Now, this is an existing problem from before. If I hit new again, 32, 32, 32, 32, you'll see we're just getting more and more layers. Okay? And that's because we don't clear down that list of layers when we create new maps. So we should probably do that when we're loading them as well. So if I close down the editor now, what I'm going to do is fix this problem really quickly. In the form1 class, if we scroll up, here where we have the new map event handler, we just need to clear down that list. So listboxlayers.items.clear. Okay, and we'll have the same problem as well if we load a new map which has differing layers from the previous one. So we need to fire this event in that case as well. So if we head over to the MonoGame editor class here, where we fire that new map invoke here, we're going to copy that and paste that in underneath our load map here. And just so we know it covers all bases. Okay, so if we give that a quick launch again, hit new, 32, 32, 32, 32, and you'll see we're not duplicating the number of layers, so it's all working correctly. And so we can take some heed and confidence in knowing that it's going to work when we load new maps as well. Okay, so I can try that out now, file, load, and then select my map.map. So it's resized to the correct size of the map that I saved, and it's given it the correct tiles. So now just real quick, what we're going to do is test to make sure that layers are working correctly. So we'll create a new map, 32, 32, 32, 32. Okay, so it's quite large. We're going to set up a couple of layers really quickly. So my base layer, I'm going to place a load of these tiles there, and then in my second layer, I'm going to place this tile over the top of it. Just so we have a little pattern there, which kind of demonstrates to us how our layers are working when they're saved and reloaded. So base layer, I'll put these underneath there. Okay, so you can kind of see a little bit of a setup there that I've got going on. The grass is on the second layer, the cobble tiles are on the base layer. And it's quite a large map as well. So it should look the same when I save and reload it. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to call this my map 2. Save that. I'm going to close down the editor as if I've walked away to get myself a coffee. I'm going to hit start. And now I'm going to reload it again. So file, load, my map 2, and then hit open. Expand the size of my editor window. It's looking good so far. And then you'll see the map is exactly as I left it before. So we know our saving is working. And that's pretty much all there is to it, really. It's quite a simple process. It gets more complicated when you introduce more concepts to it. But the concept behind saving and loading is really, really simple if you just break it down into small steps. And so from this, what we can do is then start loading them up into the game project. And then we can start playing around with adding entities and walking around our maps because we know we can save them from the editor and reload them into the game. And that's the whole aim of this next few episodes, so we can start getting more depth to our game and its functionality. And with that, that marks the end of this episode, chaps. I hope you enjoyed that. I know I enjoyed working on it. It's really exciting me to see the amount of depth this project has already, and it's just filling me with ideas about what we can do moving forward. So please tune in for the next episode, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye bye for now.